Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us during this crisis. Our country is in crisis, whether or not the politicians here in town wish to acknowledge it. We have the second assassination attempt on the life of President Trump. I'll talk about that, obviously. The media already wants us to move on from that. We had the failure of Congress to prevent or to ensure in a more significant way that aliens aren't voting in our elections. Judicial Watch has key court updates about election integrity and Ashli Babbitt. We've got new threats, basically inspired, in my view, by the left, targeting not only President Trump, but the Supreme Court of the United States, and really so much more in terms of Judicial Watch litigation to expose leftist abuse and extremism under the auspices of government and really your tax dollars at work or your tax dollars being misused. So I'll talk about our new FOIA lawsuits in that regard as well. First up is the second assassination attempt on the life of President Trump. It occurred last Sunday while he was golfing. A leftist radical was caught by a Secret Service agent, the circumstances of which to me are still unclear, ready to shoot him a little bit of ways from where he was golfing. At the time, he probably, I don't know where he was aiming or what sight he had of President Trump. Given the weapon he had the ability to kill him right then and there, at least from the spot. And supposedly the Secret Service agent saw the gun in the bushes near a fence or through a fence. Again, it's unclear because the Secret Service hasn't been terribly forthcoming, or I don't even think they understand what happened at this point still. And he fled, and he was later arrested because a heroic civilian, saw him running away, realized that something was up, and took some pictures, including of the car in which he drove away, and got his license plate. And so they were able to get him relatively quickly. Now, Mr. Ruth is his name, has been since arrested, as I note, and there's some. There's a picture of him. I think he's about, what, 58 or so? I think there's we have a little bit of video of him getting arrested. Let's run one of those videos.
2 steps to your right! Take 2 steps to your right! Driver! Walk straight back! Keep walking!
What's your name, boss? Ryan?
Exceedingly dangerous situation for the police there. They didn't know what they were running up against there. For all I know, his car could have been wired with explosives. He could have been wired with explosives. A very precarious situation law enforcement was placed in as a result of the Secret Service failures. The failures which are extraordinary, especially in light of the prior failures that got Trump killed almost 2 months to the day beforehand. The perimeter of the golf course wasn't secured. He was sitting out there, the data from his phone suggests, for 12 hours. And the Secret Service didn't do the basic perimeter security sweep at his golf course that he golfs at all the time. Inexcusable. I don't think it's incompetence anymore. Not that I ever really thought it was incompetence. I think it's willful negligence. I think the Secret Service, under the command and control of the Biden-Harris regime, has been giving Trump not enough security on purpose. And, you know, I know that's a tough statement to say, But this administration has a demonstrated record of making protection decisions based on politics. They denied it to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as Judicial Watch uncovered and disclosed. Mayorkas personally denied Secret Service protection to Robert Kennedy. He only was granted it for a brief period of time after Trump was nearly killed. They denied Secret Service protection to President Biden's granddaughter. One of Hunter's children, he was involved in some type of dispute with the mother of the child over payments for child support. And so this kid was put at risk because the Biden family didn't seemingly want to acknowledge the relationship in any public way, meaning Secret Service protection for her. And it's not about money. I mean, we're going to hear this week and next week, we got to give money to Secret Service. And don't you believe it? They've got $3+ billion. Their budget keeps on going up and up and up. It's not about money. These are political decisions to deny resources necessary to protect Trump, given the threats he faces. And immediately after the second assassination attempt, the Secret Service, as I note in one of my tweets here, they start leaking to the Washington Post. And this was actually, they had done this before too, but it was more and more the same, that Trump should have known his golf courses weren't safe. I mean, they're trying to make us believe that this federal agency that has, virtually speaking, unlimited resources is unable to secure a golf course. Don't you believe it? And frankly, it began, at least after the first assassination attempt, everyone was seemingly horrified. But immediately the left took a different tact after the second assassination attempt. And I think it's a tact that is terribly dangerous for the future of the country. They've crossed yet another Rubicon. So many Rubicons have been crossed, it seems, when it comes to the attacks on Trump and the efforts to undermine our constitutional system and the rule of law. But the left and their media mavens, or their media allies and henchmen, they've decided that they're going to tell Americans that Trump deserves to be shot because of his rhetoric. You hear this repeated refrain that, given his heated rhetoric, we should expect this type of violence. Blaming the victim. And the suggestion is, if he does get killed, it's his fault. It's not the fault of the Secret Service that's obligated to protect him. It's not the fault of politicians who have used the most extreme language to describe him. I mean, if you are talking about someone as a threat to democracy and, quote, dangerous, it's one thing to say, I don't like these ideas. I think these ideas are terrible. But to say the person is dangerous and a threat, an existential threat, as has been described, is it any surprise that someone like Mr. Ruth would follow up? Look at what Hillary said right after the assassination.
And I don't understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is. The late, great journalist Harry Evans.
There you have it. Exhibit A in the effort to gin up violence against President Trump. What's also very interesting is the background of Mr. Ruth. He is notorious. He's well known in the media. He had been quoted in the New York Times, many other publications, as being involved in trying to get foreign nationals, including Americans, to go and fight in Ukraine. He was in Ukraine for a period of time. According to the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. government was warned about him because he was seen as a nut and dangerous. A former CIA official also took note of him. And I tell you, if you were an American fighting in Ukraine or messing around as he was, you can be sure the CIA was monitoring you. If the CIA was doing its job, it would be monitoring you. An American fighting in a theater such as Ukraine. And of course, his international travels and the kind of the crazed things he was involved in raises all sorts of significant questions about who knew what and when about him. What did the CIA know about him? What did the FBI know about him and when? It also raises questions about foreign, whether he was being run or managed or manipulated by foreign intelligence services or foreign entities. If he's in Ukraine, it could have been the Ukrainians running him. It could have been the Russians running him. You don't know. He had been arrested repeatedly, and he was dangerous. He repeatedly cited violent rhetoric. So the government, again, I've noted, and Robert, I'm trying to think of the name because it's not my line. It's someone else's line. I can't give him credit because I can't remember his name. It's Poole. I think it's Robert Poole. Maybe it's Bill Poole. Well, anyway, Mr. Poole. He always has highlighted, these people who show up with these behind these attacks. The media language is a lone wolf, and he points out it's often they are known wolves. Ruth is no lone wolf. He's a known wolf. And irrespective of his background and suspicions about how he got there and how he magically knew to hang out at that golf course, I mean, I follow Trump pretty closely. I don't know where he is from day to day and week to week. I mean, why was he in Florida? How was he funded? Why did he have the instinct to be at that golf course overnight? It sounds like he was there from 1 a.m. until he fired or was caught, fired upon. All of those questions need to be answered. And who's going to answer them? The FBI? I don't trust the FBI. I just don't trust them. The FBI chief of the Miami office, the special agent in charge, I didn't call this up earlier, Mr. What's his last name? Viteri? I put it up on my on my Instagram, on my Twitter. Anyway, back in the 2023, a whistleblower came forward and said that before he was elevated, he had to scrub and was ordered to scrub his social media of anti-Trump vitriol. So he's an anti-Trumper, according to this whistleblower, according to the Washington Times. He's running the investigation. This FBI, as I tweeted out, that's trying to jail Trump is now investigating 2 attempts on his life. Is that not a conflict of interest, as I note here in this tweet? Who can you trust? The Secret Service? We caught them lying about whether or not they were denying Trump's requests for added protection. They were, and they denied it, and they were. And as you can tell from what happened at the golf course, it's not even a question of added protection, it's a question of basic protection. And of course, the agents who are close to Trump and surrounding him, and the agent who shot at him, he didn't hit him. You know, they deserve support, and they deserve to be raised up. But those men and women are being put in jeopardy because of the failure of the agency around them. I mean, the fact that someone had to shoot at someone who had been sitting there for 12 hours is a failure of the agency. That agent was put at risk. Obviously, President Trump and his friend he was golfing with, and everyone else in that area was put at risk. And Judicial Watch has been fighting for the truth. You know, we've been running up against Secret Service stonewalls for years. I mean, look at this chutzpah from President Biden on the Secret Service the other day. The Secret Service needs help. I don't know, did everyone hear it on there? I didn't hear it here. Yeah. And as I look what I wrote in the tweet there. Bring out the tweet again. Man who let his dogs attack 24 Secret Service personnel says the agency needs help. And I click on that link to our Judicial Watch press release. How Biden let his dog just attack Secret Service agents time and time again, and nothing was done until Judicial Watch exposed it. So the Secret Service is in crisis. And they just issued this report just shortly before I went on to talk about things on this video. The Secret Service, the Biden-Harris Secret Service, did an investigation of the Biden-Harris Secret Service's failure to protect President Trump. So, not terribly credible, and sure enough, there's this 5-page summary of this internal after-action report or review, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty weak tea. It's written in a lot of passive voice. You know what I mean by passive voice, where the theme of the document is mistakes were made. That's passive voice, right? For example, I think I highlighted a few things I wanted to get to here. On the 3rd page, there was some discussion regarding the site selection between POTUS, RPN, Trump staff, and local elected representatives. So I don't know what RPN means. I've looked that up. Oh, former President of the United States, Republican presidential nominee. So I guess that was, Trump and his campaign staff. However, it appears the Butler's Farm show site was selected by staff because it was a better venue to accommodate the large number of desired attendees. The site was seen by the Secret Service and our local law enforcement partners as a challenge. Okay, and this is where the passive voice starts creeping in. Advanced personnel and multiple supervisors with oversight of the security plan at the Butler Farm venue recognized line-of-sight concerns. However, the security measures to alleviate these concerns were not carried out as intended. Well, who didn't carry it out? What excuse is there for that? You don't have to be an expert in personal protection or a Secret Service agent or law enforcement to think if they're not checking out the site ahead of time as required by their own protocols, that isn't mistakes were made. That's dysfunction. That means our president isn't protected. And I don't mean Trump, I mean President Biden. I mean, you can presume every other protectee is at risk. I think there are political issues with the deployment of resources for Trump, but there's certainly competency issues on top of that that make me worry for everyone under the protection of the Secret Service. This is a classic. Specialty asset impact. The next page. There have been numerous questions regarding the approval, denial, and decision-making process for specialized assets. The visit was supported by Secret Service counter-sniper and counter-assault assets. These and other tactical assets are sometimes augmented by law enforcement partners. While the advance team from the local office and the protective detail were afforded sufficient notice to conduct an unabbreviated advance, the counter-sniper asset arrived later during the advance week. So they were late. And they note, if they had been there maybe from the get-go, this could have been avoided because they would have been able to have a fulsome conversation with their partners. And then they have this drone system. Look at this next paragraph. This is psycho. The protective detail provided a counter-unmanned aerial system advance agent for the visit. Due to the former president's schedule, which involves a steady cadence of outdoor events and activity, the protective detail prioritized this asset to counter drones and similar threats. There were some technical difficulties experienced by the advanced personnel with that system. It is possible that if this element of the advance had functioned properly, so their drone didn't work. And remember, the kid had a drone out there. They didn't tell the local snipers, it's also confirmed here. The local police cover the roof. So they didn't. Secret Service's fault. They told one Secret Service agent, a top official, about the guy once he was once he was picked out as someone to figure out what he was up to. Secret Service guy didn't tell anyone else. All of this. We just find out, and we can't even get in response to the craziness that they exposed and knew about on July 13th. They still didn't have sufficient security for Trump 2 months later at the golf course. And they start blaming him for it. And we still don't have one record under FOIA from this gang. Let's go to this. It's worth talking about again. Let's go to this video.
Hey everyone, Judicial Watch just filed its first FOIA lawsuit on the Trump assassination attempt. This lawsuit was against the Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, over its repeated rejection of requests for extra security by the Trump team. Now, the Biden Secret Service lied about its rejections of Trump's requests. And if they had granted Trump's request for extra security, the assassination attempt arguably could have been prevented, and an American citizen would be alive today. So on top of the scandal about lying, about denying protection to Trump, they're hiding records from the American people. And that's why Judicial Watch is doing the heavy lifting in federal court to get the full truth about the Trump assassination attempt, which in the end is a massive government scam.
So the secrecy helps the Secret Service avoid accountability, and if there's no accountability, things aren't going to be fixed. Even folks on the Hill recognize that money isn't the answer. I mean, some Democrats are saying, we're not just going to throw money at this. There's an agency issue. But right now there's an emergency, because this isn't like, we don't have a lot of time. I'm afraid Trump is going to get killed. I'm afraid he's going to get killed before the election. I'm afraid that these 2 assassination attempts that came close to killing him will incite and invite others to try, because they may think they have a chance. Matt Gaetz was on social media this week. He was on a cable network, or I think he was on our friend Just the News's John Sullivan's show at Just the News. And he said he had a whistleblower or a source tell him that there were 3 assassination teams associated with foreign groups here in the United States, foreign governments, targeting Trump, and 2 who were homegrown. 5. So this is an emergency. It's a national emergency. And so we got to get on it and just not pretend, well, Trump needs to stop golfing, or Trump can't talk anymore and campaign anymore as the left wants him to do. And if he says anything we don't like, we're going to justify the shooting of him because he deserved it for inciting people, because people just hate him. The evil out there in our politics is awful. I mean, right now, the Secret Service isn't producing any documents to Judicial Watch. In fact, we're trying to get the audio, I think it's the audio of the shooter's parents or father or someone calling. And the Secret Service, the locals are giving us the runaround on it. And the Secret Service intervened to support the locals suppressing the information. So it's a massive cover-up. And of course, the argument is there's ongoing law enforcement proceedings. Under that theory of the case, we'll never get documents because the proceedings never stop. And of course, there's a significant public interest in protecting President Trump's life and the lives of people who want to go and listen to him talk. And the idea that because someone's looking into it, we can't know about the failures of the agency and the details of what's being uncovered so that people can better protect themselves and understand the failures of an agency? Who are they kidding? So don't put out these documents, Secret Service. Don't try to pretend that we should trust you, FBI, when you're not telling us a darn thing under law what you're up to, about what you're up to. And it's getting worse. Some lunatic up in Alaska got arrested, despite, I guess, months of threatening Trump and Supreme Court justices. And what's interesting about it is they're pretending that they can't tell us who he was threatening, even though it's clear it was conservatives. The conservatives, 6 conservative justices on the court, and the Supreme Court, and President Trump. And you know why they don't want to tell us that? Because it doesn't fit with their narrative that the threat to democracy comes from Trump and his supporters, when in fact there's this murderous rage on the left that's being incited, in my view, by the extremist rhetoric of politicians running for office and their media acolytes. Page 2 of this indictment was filed this week. First comment, the excerpts. I'd like to see former President 1. Who do you think that is? And Supreme Court Justice 1. Who do you think that is? Hanging together from an oak tree. Subject, using the N-word. Referencing, obviously, Justice Thomas. I'd like to see you have a real lynching, and I'll donate the tree. And so it just gets worse and worse. I'm not going to read it all because it's all horrible. But this Justice Department has encouraged this type of activity because they've yet to enforce the federal law that prohibits protests outside the homes to intimidate justices in their proceedings, which have been happening since Roe and continue, practically speaking, to this day. They really haven't stopped. And of course, the target are conservatives. And that type of non-enforcement led to an attempted murder of Justice Kavanaugh and his family. That's now scheduled for proceedings in court finally, after being delayed for months as the Justice Department tried to negotiate with the guy's lawyer. We have news out this week further undermining the Supreme Court's. I don't know who leaked it. My guess is one of the left-wing justices or someone close to them. The internal memos of Supreme Court deliberations on cases the left doesn't like having lost, specifically Trump's immunity case. So these memoranda are sent by justices to scope out where they want to take a case, where it's going, what the view of the majority is going to be, what the view of the minority is going to be. Just think of the kind of the back and forth and judicial deliberations that take place. And now they've been leaked out in a way to hurt Chief Justice Roberts, smear Alito, and others, all to advance the left-wing narrative that Supreme Court decisions we don't like are should result in the removal of justices automatically. And attacks on the operations of the court. Remember, the Roe Dobbs decision was leaked out in a way to induce violence and increase threats. Because because it was leaked, the initial decision, the draft decision, it confirmed there was a majority to overturn Roe. Well, that could have incited a nut job to take out the majority. And if internal deliberations all of a sudden are going to be subject to leak by leftists who don't like the way cases are going, well, that's going to impair the operations of the court, undermine the rule of law, because the justices rely on a certain amount of confidentiality when deciding cases. And the back and forth, generally it's supposed to be professional and kept in confidence. If I were a justice on the Supreme Court, I wouldn't even meet with them if I couldn't trust the justices. Say, this is how I vote. I'll send an email. Let me know how the decision is going to be written and I'll participate. I mean, that's where I fear it's going to go. Is that going to make for better court comity? No. Of course, but the left wants to destroy the court. And if they can't disrupt it from the outside, they'll destroy it from within. So it's been an ugly week for the rule of law. It's been an ugly week for the future of our republic. So pray for President Trump that he's safe. Pray for his family, and think about if you work for Trump and your boss nearly gets killed twice. Think of the trauma for you. I mean, and think of the trauma for the rest of the country. I mean, it's upsetting. I know the left loves the idea of President Trump being killed, too many of them, but normal people are horrified. Horrified. It's an attack, and it's an assassination attempt. Even unsuccessful, is an attack on our Republican form of government, the rule of law. Speaking of the rule of law, Congress failed again this week. The Republican-controlled House failed to, in part due to a small group of conservative Republicans and every Democrat, to pass a continuing resolution that would have included, or was set to include, or included, the SAVE Act, a law which was designed to close any loopholes and make it much more difficult for aliens to vote in our elections. As you know, by now, I hope, that the only prohibition on aliens voting in our elections, or the only effective way of checking that, is the honor system. There are other ways of checking it, but they're far from perfect. Someone who is an alien, a non-citizen, isn't supposed to register to vote. And on the form it says you got to certify you're a citizen. If not, it's illegal. But there's no verification of citizenship required. And this law would have changed it. And because it's a continuing resolution that some conservatives hate and never want to support, and because it stopped, so that's why those conservative Republicans voted against it. And then, of course, the Democratic Party and the left seemingly want aliens to vote in elections. Why would they oppose this otherwise? I mean, here's what I had to say about the issue in the middle of the week just before the vote.
Hey everyone, here on Capitol Hill, as there's this big debate in the House whether to pass a continuing resolution with a law that will actually put teeth into the federal prohibition on non-citizens voting. Right now it's way too easy for them to get away with it. This law is certainly necessary for election integrity in the United States. What do you think? Should there be a continuing resolution without making sure that aliens aren't voting in our elections in an aggressive way? Share your views. Call the Hill. Call your congressman at 202-225-3121. That's 202-225-3121.
So now the next test is are they going to shut the government down in order to make sure this law gets passed? Because without the continuing resolution, there'll be at least a partial government shutdown. Now, what do you think? Again, you've got to share your views with Congress. I mean, I think there ought to be all sorts of things associated with the continuing resolution. If you want to continue, if you want to write a blank check to the government, we need to have republic protecting provisions that address crises that are imminent. As I've highlighted, alien voting, the border crisis, the efforts to jail Trump, defund that, you name it. So I have all sorts of reasons to vote against continuing resolutions if I were in Congress. But if I were to vote for one, there'd have to be at least something to make it worth passing. And the question is there going to be something making it worth passing that any congressman can honorably vote for and be willing to stand against in terms of forcing a government shutdown? And unfortunately, I think it's going to be more of the same, but I think you should let your views be known. I mean, the more the people react negatively to even failures by the House Republican Congress to pass good things, in this case the House, it does have a salutary effect. So we've also been in court this week on a lot of big issues. And speaking of Congress, a big issue is the death of Ashli Babbitt, who was the only official homicide victim on January 6th. I love that picture of Ashli. And Judicial Watch filed a wrongful death lawsuit for her estate and her family, Aaron Babbitt, her mom, Mickey. They deserve vindication, don't you think? She was shot for no good reason by Lieutenant Byrd. So the case is proceeding, and we had filed it initially in San Diego. The Biden Justice Department, Freudian slip. Their reaction was to move it to Washington, D.C., where it currently now is. And we were concerned that the judges here weren't terribly friendly and were biased, and we still are. But nevertheless, the case is proceeding. So the government's objecting to some of our claims, but other claims they've just answered, which means the case is proceeding. And there was a court hearing today. I didn't go to it. I didn't get a chance to talk to the lawyer, but as best I can tell, a trial has been set for the middle of January, for the middle of 2026. And discovery is essentially going to commence. I think there's still a disagreement over the scope of discovery and how much discovery, meaning evidence gathering, that Judicial Watch lawyers will be able to conduct on behalf of their Ashli's estate and her family. But it's full speed ahead, practically speaking, as far as best I can tell. And that's a great victory. I mean, this is vindication for her. The process is vindication. Obviously, we want to win, but there's been no accountability for it. And the public demands it. Americans know about Ashli Babbitt. They know that she was needlessly killed, and they want justice for her. I mean, I spoke about it, and I was moved by the public response at CPAC when I talked about our case. Let's go to that. I got very upset again recently about January 6th. I was rewatching the video of the needless killing of Ashli Babbitt, the Air Force veteran, shot for no good reason by Lieutenant Michael Byrd of the U.S. Capitol Police. Now, I've watched those videos. I can't believe he just shot her dead like that. I just can't believe it. And few in this corrupt city give a rat's tail about that awful shooting. But millions of Americans care. And her family cares. I think her mom, Mickey, is still here at CPAC. Is Mickey here? Well, give her a round of applause anyway. God bless her. And that's why I'm so pleased Judicial Watch just filed a $30 million wrongful death lawsuit against the U.S. government. On behalf of the family of Ashli Babbitt, as our lawsuit states, the facts speak truth. Ashli was ambushed when she was shot by Lieutenant Byrd. Multiple witnesses at the scene yelled, "You just murdered her." Judicial Watch is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. I tell you what, if it takes 30 more years to get justice for Ashli, that will be time well spent. Yeah, it's hard to tell in the video, but the crowd was ginormous. It was, I spoke just before President Trump was speaking, so the room was packed. So it was pretty overwhelming to see the support for Ashli's mom, obviously there, and justice for her. So this case is proceeding, so there'll be wins and losses as we proceed in the case, but this is a wrongful death, extraordinarily, in that there's been no accountability for it, but for this lawsuit brought by your Judicial Watch. So we're honored to be able to do it. And I'll keep you apprised as events warrant about the litigation as it proceeds. But as far as I'm concerned, it's full speed ahead. Oh, speaking of court action this week, I know as we come up on the elections, there's increased concern, as we talked about with Congress, related to election integrity. And one of the big issues as it relates to election integrity, especially since they're mailing everybody and their mother ballots in certain states, is making sure the voting rolls are clean, as federal law requires. The National Voter Registration Act requires states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls, and too often that isn't done. And Judicial Watch has been the national leader in requiring that the states follow the law, suing them, cajoling them, persuading them, settling with them, forcing them to clean up the rolls. 4 million names have been cleaned up as a result of Judicial Watch's diligent efforts in the last year or two, including in California alone, Los Angeles County, I think it was 1.6 million names or 1.2 million names, but 4 million total. New York City, 440,000 names. Here in Washington, D.C., 138,000 names. We cleaned up rolls in our litigation led to the cleanup of rolls in North Carolina and Kentucky and Pennsylvania. And but we just don't sit on our laurels. We sued recently Illinois. They're not cleaning the rolls in Illinois, and there are still major issues in California. And then we sued in California. So between California and Illinois, there are millions potentially of names that need to be removed. And our top election lawyer, Bob Popper, was in court in California this week as the state there and the jurisdictions essentially want to throw the case out. So we'll see what the court decides in the end, but the cases are proceeding. And there could be a new case against Oregon where their rolls are a mess as well. It's almost certain to be filed. I'm not sure when it's going to get filed, but it's just a matter, I hope. I'm always hesitant to say, oh, we're going to file a lawsuit for sure, because you never know. Until it's like, it's not over to the fat lady sings. We haven't filed, unless we file a lawsuit, you never know if the lawsuit's ever going to get filed. It's only when it's filed am I at least 100% sure that it's been done. So again, Judicial Watch is relentless in making sure the rolls are cleaner. And it's not just yelling about it, it's going to court about it, it's educating Americans about it, and it's literally getting it done. 4 million names. But that's a huge percentage of the total voter registration universe in the United States. And that's not the only set of issues related to election integrity we've been pursuing. We've also sued Illinois for counting ballots 14 days after elections, ballots that arrive 14 days after elections. We've also sued in Mississippi for a similar law, over a similar law where they count ballots that arrive for up to 5 days after elections. Federal law sets at election day. And to take ballots and count them after election day obviously is contrary to law. It invites voter fraud and undermines voter confidence. Now, in both cases, we lost at the lower level, but the first appellate version, the first appellate argument in our appeal is going to be heard next week. I think it's going to be down in New Orleans at the appellate, at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. So there are, I think, 19 or so states that count ballots that arrive after Election Day. I think in California it's 7 days. D.C. it's several days as well. But you can check your locals, your state rules, and you'll see who is on the list in terms of states. But our elections need to be secure in so many different ways. Citizenship verification, voter ID. I mean, a bunch of big states don't have any voter ID. You just show up, tell them your name, if that, and you're allowed to vote. That's not secure. Even states with voter ID, some of them need to strengthen them. Not enough states have strong voter ID. So just don't rest on your laurels. So we need voter ID, citizenship verification, we need clean voter rolls. I mean, I think early voting is a terrible idea, but, maybe that horse has left the barn. I think that invites fraud as well. Mail-in balloting, I think, is an abomination. Widespread mass mail-in balloting. Yes, I know there are exceptions for mail-in balloting. The exceptions prove the rule. The exception being, like, for instance, if you're a member of the armed forces fighting terrorists in the middle of Syria, you get to mail in your ballot. Everyone else, show up and vote on Election Day. Again, another basic rule. Election Day, not election week, not election month. And why does the left oppose all of this? Because, in my view, they want to be able to steal elections. So, your Judicial Watch has taken the lead in trying to secure our elections in important ways over the last several years. And we're not going to back down. We're not going to back down. They want to the left wants to intimidate. And remember, all these charges against Trump and all this nonsense about going after people challenging elections in the various states, it's all designed to intimidate people like me, groups like Judicial Watch, from enforcing the rule of law when it comes to elections. And we're not going to be intimidated. As you can tell, we're in court this week. We're going to be in court next week. And the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, to ensure that your elections are fairer, cleaner, and more honest. You know, one of the other important cases we're pursuing, it's a historic case and it's a national case that a lot of people are focused on, is our class action civil rights lawsuit against the city of Evanston, Illinois. They have a program to provide cash based on race. There are two groups of people that are eligible. If they were residents of Evanston during a certain period of time, I think it was 1919 to 1969, or they had parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents who were residents of Evanston. And they're black. They don't have to prove discrimination. All you have to say is, I was a resident and I identify as black. Or my parent or grandparent, etc., was a resident and identify as black. And right now they're getting $25,000, or have gotten $25,000 if they fit that criteria. Our Judicial Watch's clients are white and would otherwise be eligible but for the color of their skin. So it's a discriminatory program based solely on race. And as you know, reparations is the new hobby horse for the left. They want to redistribute wealth and undermine America through reparation systems and reparation programs, divide our country. And much of what they promote in terms of reparations is just race discrimination or distribution of race, redistribution of wealth, using race as a pretext, all of which is unconstitutional and illegal, in my view, under federal law, and as we allege in this lawsuit. And so we sued, and Evanston, which is well represented, I think they got a big law firm working against us here. They're trying to throw the case out based on standing, that our clients don't have standing. So we're trying to keep the case alive. So they don't want to really address the merits of the claim. They just don't want anyone to be able to sue. At least they don't want our clients to be able to sue. And this is how we respond. Plaintiffs have alleged all facts necessary to state a timely claim that but for their race they are eligible to participate in the program and receive $25,000 direct cash payments. The program's eligibility requirements are simple, straightforward, and easy to satisfy, and plaintiffs have alleged They were and are, quote, ready and able to satisfy them at all relevant times. The program's use of a race-based ineligibility requirement is presumptively unconstitutional, and remedying societal discrimination is not a compelling government interest. So you can only engage in discrimination if you've got a compelling government interest. I don't buy that, but nor is remedying discrimination from as many as 105 years ago or remedying intergenerational discrimination ever been recognized as a compelling government interest. Among the program's other fatal flaws is that it uses race as a proxy for discrimination without requiring proof of discrimination. Are there people who live in Evanston in that time period who were discriminated against? I'm sure. But that's not the qualification. You don't have to show you've been discriminated against. You don't have to show you've been harmed. They're just giving you $25,000 because of the color of your skin. And that's not right under our Constitution. Evanston's reparations scheme rejects a colorblind Constitution and unconstitutionally discriminates against anyone who does not identify as black or African American. The court should allow Judicial Watch's class action civil rights lawsuit to proceed. So we'll see what the court does. But as I noted, this case has gotten a lot of national attention because Evanston is the first official reparations program. And hopefully we can get the court to shut it down, vindicate our client's civil rights, and stop this venomous racialism before it gets out of the starting gate further. And, you know, this isn't the only area where we've been fighting the left's attempt to blow up our laws against race discrimination, which, by the way, are enshrined in the 14th Amendment. You know the phrase, equal protection of the law? The left hates it because it gets in the way of their racialism. In Minneapolis, there was a public school, a union contract with public teachers, the Public Teachers Union. And if there were layoffs, as you know, under the contract, any layoffs, let's say the budget was cut and there would be layoffs, there would be, typically it's a matter of seniority. The people who are last hired are the first out. That's a typical public employee union contract, which I think is kind of outrageous in and of itself, because I think it should be, who's the best worker? That's the way layoffs should be done. But that's not typically how it's done. It's usually seniority that provides you protection from layoffs in budgetary cuts. Or I shouldn't say usually, but it would be a standard contract. But in this case, there's an exception. It's first in, first out, unless you're black or a member of a quote an underrepresented group. You're skipped over and they go to the white person and they fire them or lay them off. How's that legal? It isn't. And that's why we sued. And the lower court initially, it's a taxpayer lawsuit because taxpayers have a right in Minnesota to challenge unlawful expenditures of taxpayer funds. In this case, expenditures that would promote discrimination and racism contrary to law. The Minnesota Court of Appeals reversed the lower court ruling that throughout the case, so the case was resurrected, but the teachers union appealed it to the Minnesota Supreme Court. So now we've got to go argue before the Minnesota Supreme Court why it is taxpayers can't be treating people based on race and firing or laying them off and hiring them back based on race. It's just incredible that there's even an issue here. But that's where the extremist left has gone. And that Minnesota Supreme Court argument takes place, I think it takes place on October 1st. So the week after next. We've had other cases, too, where in Asheville, North Carolina, they had a scholarship program funded by the city that was limited based on race. And we sued. Asheville retracted the policy. In California, the left there passed 2 laws requiring gender, race, ethnicity, and other quotas for corporate boards of directors in private companies, public companies. Race, sex, ethnicity quotas, LGBT quotas, completely illegal under the California Constitution. And we won. We knocked them both out. There were 2 lawsuits we filed. We won both. Ended, thanks to Judicial Watch. So again, it's not just Judicial Watch complaining, it's Judicial Watch doing, as I like to say, the heavy lifting to advance the rule of law and to protect the Constitution, which is under attack. The 14th Amendment is under attack from the left. They don't like equal protection under the law. They don't like it, and they want to end it. And if that's ended, the Republic ends, in my view. They got so much going on. 2 new great cases under FOIA. So did you know the extremist leftists in Congress visited the murderous communist regime of Cuba not that long ago? It's actually in February of 2024, a congressional delegation led by Democratic Representatives Ilhan Omar and Congresswoman Jayapal, Pramila Jayapal, she's from Washington State, and speaking of Minnesota, that's where Ilhan Omar is from. They went to communist Cuba in a kind of a secretive trip. It wasn't well reported. In fact, the American media didn't pick up on it. Let me see. Yeah, this is what happened. The trip had not been reported in Cuba state media until the Miami Herald reported on February 27th that Omar and Jayapal led a delegation of about 12 people who visited the communist island, which has been under U.S. embargo for more than 60 years. The delegation to Cuba included a congressional staffer from the office of Barbara Lee, the congresswoman from California. Jayapal, who chairs the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and Omar have criticized the embargo and have advocated for the removal of the communist-controlled Cuba from the U.S. list of nations which sponsor terrorism. I mean, the regime is a murderous regime. They murder their own people. They murder Americans. Everything that you think they could be into, they are. The mysterious trip, according to the New York Post, which took place during one of the times that the House was in recess, which seems to be almost 24/7 these days, also overlapped with a visit to Havana by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. That's interesting, huh? Marco Rubio wrote on Twitter in response to the trip, pro-Hamas members of Marxist congressional squad just returned from a secret visit with anti-American dictatorship in Cuba. Really outrageous, isn't it? So we had asked the Biden-Harris State Department for documents about the trip. They track trips like this, obviously they do. And even if I don't know if we have an embassy there now still, maybe. Do we still have an embassy there? I don't think we do. I think Obama tried to open one. I forget how that all worked out. All records related, we asked the State Department, all records related to the Congressional delegation to Cuba in February 2024, specifically the Omar Jayapal trip. And they've given us the runaround. Straightforward request. State Department obviously monitored this trip. They were members of Congress. They probably were involved in helping it take place. That would be, again, standard operating procedure, and they're hiding records. And as I note in the press release, extremist leftist members of Congress traveled to Cuba to provide aid and comfort to the terrorist-supporting, murderous communist regime. What is the Biden-Harris administration hiding about this scandalous trip? And that's what we're in federal court for right now. There's Ilhan Omar, who has ethics issues of her own. Judicial Watch filed ethics issues over questions about immigration fraud, tax fraud, etc. The House Ethics Committee has sat on it. Jayapal is a notorious leftist, but she's the leader of the leftists in Congress. You know, chairman of the House Progressive Caucus says she's a powerful, influential figure, and they're going to cavort with the communists in Cuba. Unbelievable. There is an embassy, yeah. So, what are they hiding? We want to find out. And again, this is, again, what I love about Judicial Watch. I know I'm president of Judicial Watch. You'd think I'd love it. But I think this is why you love it, too. It's because we sue on stuff like this. I mean, I bet you didn't know about the trip. I didn't know about the trip until we frankly sued. And I'm thinking, this is great. This is great. So we also sued, you know, one of the crazed, in my view, obsessions of the left here in the United States, medical authorities in other areas of the world are backing away from it, is transgender extremism. Especially the mutilating surgeries that are performed to advance that agenda on children, or drugs hormone drugs given to children who believe they are a different sex to change their sex somehow. It's just Frankenstein-like experimentation on children. I think it's just terrible, and the fact that doctors do it and it's legal, to me, is a public policy problem. And outrageously, the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, is obsessed with promoting it. And one of the key promoters of it is Rachel Levine, who is a senior official at the Department of Health and Human Services. She's assistant secretary there. And this person is a man who has undergone transgender treatments and now presents as a woman. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I mean, because the left wants to destroy you if you misgender someone. So this person, Rachel Levine, is a transgender extremist. And I don't point it out because of the transgender nature of the person, but because of his policies. And we had asked for records about the promotion of these mutilating treatments targeting children and surgeries targeting children. And it looks like his office was involved in promoting that and pushing it. According to a June 2024 Alabama court filing, Levine feared that the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, which is a notorious transgender extremist organization, had draft guidelines that would make it difficult for American transgender youth to obtain access to procedures, including gender-changing surgery. So they had minimum ages for these people to engage: 14 for sex hormone treatment, 15 for chest masculinization surgery, cutting off the breasts of young girls, 16 for breast augmentation and facial surgery, and age 17 for essentially destroying the sex organs of children. And Rachel Levine's office objected to those minimum age standards, which are just an abomination as they were, but even that was too much for this craziness that's taken over our Homeland Security, our Health and Human Services Department. Psychologist James Cantor provided expert testimony on documents from that international group as part of this lawsuit challenging an Alabama law that restricted this mutilation of children and such. Cantor testified that Assistant Secretary Levine influenced the substantive content of the standards of care documents based on political goals rather than science. Specifically, Assistant Secretary Levine, through a staff member, pressured the entity to remove recommended minimum ages for medical transition treatments. In a communication provided to the court, an association member had written, Sarah Boateng, who is Admiral Levine's, she's an admiral, Rachel Levine is an admiral, the chief of staff for Levine said that the biggest concern is the section below in the adolescent chapter that lists specific minimum ages for treatment. She is confident, based on the rhetoric she is hearing in D.C. and from what we've already seen, that these specific listings of ages under 18 will result in devastating legislation for trans care. She wonders if the specific ages can be taken out. So they wanted to eliminate minimum ages for mutilating surgeries for minors. Did you vote for that? Did Congress authorize expenses in that regard? I don't think so. And she invoked, the chief of staff invoked Admiral Levine's name. She likes the standards of care very much, but she was very concerned that having ages, mainly for surgery, will affect access to health care for trans youth. This isn't health care. It's the opposite of it. According to a June 25, 2024 report in the New York Times, they changed their mind. There were no minimum age requirements out of this document. Insanity. No minimum age requirement for hormone treatments or mutilating surgeries for children who supposedly think they are not the sex that biologically they are and want to change it somehow. I mean, to describe it is to kind of highlight, I think the whole focus on having children do this is demonic, to be clear. Demonic. And I don't use that word lightly. And this is your federal dollars at work, your tax dollars at work at the federal level. Biden-Harris appointee Levine, who abused power and is notorious for promoting transgender extremist policies, promoted mutilating surgeries for minors. It is no wonder the Biden-Harris administration wants to cover this up with unlawful secrecy. Judicial Watch's lawsuit to expose the truth is urgently needed to protect children. I mean, this is an emergency. We got to protect the kids from this transgender extremism. So a lot going on here at Judicial Watch. It's incredible. I mean, we're suing on the assassination. We're suing for election integrity. We're suing to expose progressives colluding with the communists in Cuba. We're suing to expose transgender extremism by the Biden-Harris administration. We're educating the American public on what Congress is up to and what they're not up to. There's really no other watchdog on earth like Judicial Watch. And we've got a new great book coming out, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. You can scan the QR code there, or go to judicialwatchbook.com. There's the cover, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. It comes out in about a month or so, October 15th, but you can buy it now, and it will get delivered around then. So set it and forget it. Go and purchase the book. It's a great way to support Judicial Watch. And as I keep on telling everyone who will listen, the book is great. You're going to love it. And you're going to want to buy more than one copy for your family members, your spouses, your children, your grandchildren, to educate them about the current crisis. And in the meantime, you should also be supporting Judicial Watch, because, as I say, no one else is doing what we're doing in terms of government watchdogging. We are your watchdog in Washington, D.C. We represent you, the American people, as we expose what the government is up to and try to stop government corruption using the wonderful tools given to us under the U.S. Constitution and law. Thank God for the First Amendment. Because really, in other countries, we wouldn't be able to do what Judicial Watch does. So we've got this precious right, and we're going to exercise it, and we do it with your support. I encourage you to support us at judicialwatch.org, judicialwatch.org. I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.